Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was formed in 1932 by King Abdulaziz, who united the four regions into a single state. That same year, an American oil company found oil in Bahrain, heightening interest in the Arabian mainland. Saudi Arabia was inhabited mostly by nomadic tribes. The country's economy was based on tourism revenue from Muslim pilgrimages to the holy city of Mecca. But as the Great Depression hit, the yearly number of pilgrimages fell from 100,000 to just 40,000, and the country was in a deep crisis. The Americans had learned from the oil shortages during World War I, and it was clear that oil was going to become a crucial resource in warfare. The Americans struck a deal with the Saudis and started looking for oil. It took several years and hundreds of unsuccessful attempts until the Americans started to drill in the Al-Hassa region. They didn't just find oil, they found by far the largest oil field in the world. Oil changed everything for the Saudis. It drastically changed the physical, human, and political geography of Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. King Abdulaziz in 1945 met US President Franklin D. Roosevelt on a Navy ship in the Suez Canal. They made a historic handshake agreement whereby Saudi Arabia would supply oil to the United States in exchange for military protection. This agreement is still in effect today. Saudi Arabia has about 16% of the world's total oil production. It's the world's second largest oil producer after the United States and by far the largest exporter. Oil constitutes 42% of their annual GDP, but it makes about 90% of their total export earnings. Its lack of diversity is their most important liability. The Saudis have had diplomatic relations with Iran even before their kingdom was formed, but they fundamentally differ from each other. Take oil. Saudi Arabia has a lot of oil in a very small population. They think long-term, meaning that they can benefit from moderating prices. Iran is the opposite. They have a large population and many immediate concerns. They think short-term and they want to have higher prices. Besides differences over oil prices, they clash over each other's relationship with the West, their stance on Israel, and they have vast religious and political differences. Meanwhile, both countries, so fundamentally different from each other, strive to each achieve regional dominance. After World War II, Saudi Arabia developed close ties with the United States and the United Kingdom, but even before that, their relationship was strained. In 1943, during the Hajj in Mecca, an Iranian pilgrim was accused of showing disrespect and was executed. This incident led to Iran severing their diplomatic ties. In Iran, it was an exciting period. Their prime minister was trying to break the shackles of colonialism and wanted to nationalize their oil industry. The British still exerted massive economic control, and this new prime minister was determined to end that once and for all. The United Kingdom had a lot to lose, and the United States perceived this prime minister as a potential communist threat. They jointly backed the opposition, and in 1953, the Prime Minister of Iran was overthrown. The position of the Shah, or the King, was strengthened, and Iran became an important partner to the West in the Cold War against the Soviet Union. During this period, Saudi Arabia styled itself as the leader of the Muslim world, basing its legitimacy in part on its control over the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. The two countries had deep religious differences and had different visions from the future. The Shah of Iran famously urged the King of Saudi Arabia to modernize and to open up his country, saying that he would otherwise not guarantee that he would stay on his throne. To which the Saudi king responded, "Remember, you are not the Shah of France. Your population is 90% Muslim. Please don't forget that." This competition was exactly what the United States wanted. Their policy was not to let any country become so powerful that it could control the region's oil supply. They viewed Saudi Arabia and Iran as the twin pillars of regional security. This policy is called dual containment. In 1973, the Yom Kippur War in Israel changed the Saudis' position. Saudi Arabia criticized the support of the West during the war. They led a coalition of oil-producing countries to stop exporting oil to those countries who had supported Israel. This was the 1973 oil crisis. Up to that point, Saudi Arabia was receiving a 50% share of net oil revenues, but they wanted a complete overhaul of Mid-East oil. They acquired a 25% participation interest in Aramco, but they wanted more. Saudis joined the board of Aramco and later acquired a 51% stake in the company. The remaining interest was acquired in 1976, further advancing the process of nationalizing the company. Saudi Arabia emerged more confident from the oil crisis. They attempted to set up a Gulf Security Agreement, in which they even tried to include Iran. Despite some tensions over Iran's modernizing military and Iran's seizure of several islands that were also claimed by the UAE, the decade between the late 1960s and the late 1970s was the friendliest in their history. But that would all change in arguably the most important turning point in this story, in 1979. That year, a lot happened. The Shah of Iran had been in power for decades. In many segments of society, the frustration with the regime's repression, reforms, and close association with the United States